Part 68. A Middle School Cartoonist. Author, Mao. Chapter 673. The so-called pleasure refers to a positive emotion that makes people feel good and activates their nerves. Just as human beings instinctively pursue happiness, the essence of the soul will autonomously pursue happy things that make them feel pleasure. Therefore, enjoying pleasure is not sinful, but a way of letting go of one's desire for love. It is precisely because of this visual directionality derived from the root that originally individual and independent human beings cannot exist alone, but must rely on each other, entangle with each other, and use the love in different forms and expressions between people. Let your soul feel pleasure, let yourself have a real sense of being alive, and rely on this to survive in the world. Human beings yearn for immortality because they are confused by immortality and immortality, forgetting that immortality can only be the body and not the soul. Human beings yearn for time travel because they have been deceived by the slap-in-the-face plot routines in various novels and animations, without knowing it. The pain of being out of tune with the world after time travel. Perhaps it is precisely because it is impossible to obtain that human beings pursue it so hard. After all, in essence, the concept called there is no need to cherish things that are easily obtained has long been imprinted in the depths of human souls. So don't think too deeply about something. Although there is a 10% chance that the thinker will evolve into a philosopher in the orthodox sense, there is also a 90% chance that the thinker will mistakenly evolve into anxiety disorder or anxiety disorder due to excessive thinking. Depression patients are lost on the road called life. Mangaka is such a person. No, it should be said that he is a thinker who exists like this. When talking about Koto Mangaka, we have to say a word with a distorted meaning that is generally used: pleasure. Strictly speaking, Koto Mangaka is not a villain, but readers still subconsciously classify him into the villain camp, because Koto Mangaka's behavior, even if it is not cruel, is the flaws in his character make Koto Mangaka's behavior tend to be in the evil camp. Koto Mangaka, who was born with a personality defect, is unable to feel beautiful about the things that people say are beautiful, and has difficulty forgetting many things that are said to be ugly. It is precisely because of this different understanding from ordinary people that Koto Mangaka is in. It was very troublesome when I was young. After realizing his abnormality, Koto Mangaka, like most people, once tried to correct himself, trying to be like ordinary people, able to derive pleasure from beautiful things. However, unfortunately, in this world with mysterious beings, the only people Koto Mind can come into contact with are human beings who regard abnormality as everyday life. Living in an abnormal environment, but yearning for the daily life of ordinary humans, trying his best to correct his abnormality, but found that people around him regard the abnormality as daily life, so, it's natural that Mangaka would feel confused. When human beings are confused, the emptiness in their hearts will prompt them to find a kind of faith or sustenance to support them in completing the journey called life. Therefore, Koto Mangaka chose to believe in the church, hoping that God can give him enlightenment. Guide yourself out of confusion. Learning various abilities and becoming a representative of the church, Koto Mangaka constantly tried to find ways to get rid of his confusion from all kinds of life, but he found that it seemed that nothing he could try could make him escape. Freeing yourself will only make you more confused. Therefore, whenever the abilities he mastered were about to reach the top level, Koto Mangaka gave up. It was not that he lacked the ability to continue his studies, nor that he lacked talent, but that Koto Mangaka had realized that he could not learn these abilities. Find a way out of your confusion. Mangaka's last attempt was to find someone to die with, to form a family with Claudia Ardisaya, in an attempt to correct his twisted self and save his confusion through marriage. Of myself. During this marriage, Koto Mangaka tried hard to love Ardisaya, but in the end, Koto Mangaka still couldn't achieve normal happiness by loving his wife. No, this marriage is not meaningless. Rather, it was through this short marriage that Koto Mangaka, who was thinking about the meaning of life, awakened some twisted evil tastes. Koto Minkyre had noticed that during this marriage, Koto Minkyre what caused her to feel happiness and joy was actually Ardasia's pain when she was tortured by the disease. Especially when he saw Ardasia wanting to heal himself, the more Koto Minkyre wanted to see Ardasia sigh with disappointment and sadness. Born in a religious family, Koto Minkyre has suppressed his emotions for many years. He is confused and does not know how to express, he does not know how to describe his pain, and he cannot express his joy. So when the command seal appeared in Koto Minkyre's hand, this confused man with almost no wishes could not understand why he, who had no ambition, desire, or pursuit, was chosen as the master of the Holy Grail. The death of his wife made Koto Minkyre even more confused. The death of his father made Koto Minkyre confused and driven to a desperate situation. Under the control of such a fate, the ancient king of heroes, after seeing through the essence of Koto Minkyre at a glance, used words to induce Koto Minkyre to truly realize that the pleasure he was pursuing was what? Kyre, why is your definition of pleasure so narrow? What is the contradiction between pain and lamentation and pleasure? The so-called pleasure has no specific form, it is precisely because you don't understand this that you are confused. Pursue for your own desires, this is the right way of entertainment, then entertainment will bring pleasure, pleasure will guide you in the direction of happiness, the road has been pointed out to you, Kyre. It must be said that the hero king is worthy of being the oldest king. Only people with demonic qualities like the hero king can calmly regard the behavior of tasting the pain of others and feeling happy as a pleasure behavior. This plot, Nezuma Eiji, who was originally a little depressed, lost all sleepiness in an instant after receiving the comic manuscript completed overnight by Makoto Takahashi, and read the comic with relish, especially the dialogue between the hero king and Koto Minkyre. Nezuma Eiji still couldn't put it down after reading it several times. I've always wanted to draw but couldn't, this is it. Mr. Howinkuma, you are so amazing. Oh, really? Anyway, King of Black Flame, as long as you are satisfied, compared to the energetic Eiji Nezuma, the face of a certain Chuyunibu manga artist is a little pale. Part of the reason is the side effect of turning on the cultivation mode, but more importantly, it is the massive consumption of the mind and spirit during the drawing process of the comics. During the serialization of the comic Fate, Takahashi Makoto appeared many times in the costume of Koto Minkyre. This is probably what Eiji Nezuma said before, manga artists should have a preference for a certain character in their works. This point of view. Although it is true to say so, in fact, the more important thing is, it is because when Makoto Takahashi completed the content of Koto Minkyre's pleasure tutorial, he put too much of his own emotions into the character of Koto Minkyre. After all, the so-called confusion, a certain Chuyunibu manga artist who is a time traveler also has it. In order to get rid of confusion, Kyre embarked on the road of how to find happiness under the instigation of Jin Shanshan. Makoto Takahashi looked up at the ceiling, while recovering his physical strength and spirit, he whispered to himself, "So, what about me? The pseudo-pleasure that I have been pursuing, can it really guide me to the direction of happiness when I am confused? Although I know that all readers are more rational, it is unlikely, but if it really happens, then I would like to give you a friendly reminder. Don't pursue pleasure because of the confusion in life. We should fight for our ideals, be more sunny and cheerful, face life with a good attitude, and life will definitely reward us with beauty. In short, drink this bowl of chicken soup, rest early, and have a good dream." A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 674. Chapter 674, Another Way to Obtain Pleasure, Delight. Whether confused or pleasure, life will continue to move forward. On the way from life to death, almost no one will not go astray. Should we continue to be confused, or should we take pleasure in the suffering? At this time, only you can make the choice. Some people learn from painful lessons, temper themselves in the hardships and tribulations of life, and develop a will of steel. Some people have been unable to recover since then, their minds slaughtered by failures and setbacks, and they have lost their past. The courage and confidence to act. Some people distort their will, let themselves go, and begin to embark on the path of enjoying pleasure. Yachin Mu Menjai, a good gay couple with the halo of the protagonists, has experienced repeated failures and unwillingness. Although these have once made the two of them fall into despair and confusion, but, judging from the current situation of chasing Takahashi Makoto and his new wife Eiji, and sometimes even confronting them head-on, this pair of good friends have developed a will of steel amidst setbacks and adversities. Should we say that this kind of person is undoubtedly the protagonist, or should we say that the protagonist should be this kind of person in the first place? Little Sea Otter's assistant, the fat uncle who once wanted to marry the beautiful cartoonist Kang Shuhong as an assistant and complete the true supporting actor counterattack legend, was hit by successive failures. Mentally, he was tortured so much that he gave up the possibility of becoming a cartoonist. He even gave up on the assistant role that he was originally proud of. If it weren't for Yoshida's shady editor, in order to motivate the little sea otter, maybe a guy like the fat uncle who couldn't bear the hardships of life would have returned to his hometown long ago, right? If you can't even bear failures and setbacks, how can you accomplish the legendary counterattack? For humans who like the second dimension, traveling through this time is definitely a pleasure. However, no one can bear the loneliness of "I don't belong to this world." But since you can live, you should enjoy life. If you can't eliminate the feeling of loneliness, then find something to do, whether it's a dream or the meaning of existence. In short, you can't let yourself live boringly. There is no doubt that the reason why a certain middle-level cartoonist insists on completing the serialized manga manuscript is not only because he can use the same comics to feel the connection with the world he once lived in, but also because Takahashi Makoto wants to prevent himself from letting himself go. Life is boring, so I choose to embark on that weird path called pleasure. Makoto Takahashi, who was meditating on the philosophy of life, realized that he was in a state of being spied on, and then when he looked up, he noticed that Eiji Naizuma was staring at him with scorching eyes. "Hey, Phoenix Academy Kuma-sensei, what's going to happen next?" Shinzuma Eiji's eyes flashed with anticipation. It should be with Emi Yakiritsugu, who is regarded as an enemy by Koto Mine Kaire, right? Now, what exactly is going on? What kind of plot will it be like? I really want to know. Not to mention the tired look on the other person's face and the thick dark circles under his eyes, he could still maintain such a high and curious mood after a whole night of cultivation. By the way, is this guy Eiji Arizuma really a human being? And more importantly, this guy, Eiji Arizuma, has indeed guessed the development of the plot. Although the direction is not wrong, there are some deviations in the content. So, what about the next plot? A certain second-grade cartoonist shook his head slightly, hoping to dispel the remaining remnants in his body and soul in this way. Fatigue technique, squinting his eyes and looking directly at the curious new wife Eiji, he reminded in a very pleasant tone, according to the normal comic routine, "King of Black Flame, you should notice, there's something missing from the masterpiece." "Eh? What's missing?" Eiji Naizuma responded in surprise, then lowered his head and began to frown and think about the content of this comic. After a moment, Eiji Naizuma decisively gave up the act of thinking in sync with a certain middle-class cartoonist. He asked suspiciously, "Hey, teacher Ji-gen from the Phoenix Academy, is there really anything missing from the current plot development?" Of course, Makoto Takahashi pointed at the manga manuscript in Naizumi's hands. Although he was mentally exhausted, he still couldn't help but reveal a joyful smile on his face. The next plot will of course revolve around Wei Miyakiritsugu unfolds. Although your prediction of the Black Flame King is correct, have you ever thought that since the plot of Koto Mine Kaire has been drawn before, if the plot of Emi Yakiritsugu is still drawn according to the same model, Will it look boring? Yeah, that's indeed what you said. Following Makoto Takahashi's prompts, Eiji Shinzuma quickly thought about Emi Yakiritsugu's plot, and then nodded in agreement, and according to your plan, Mr. Kyumane from the Phoenix Institute, the next development of the plot, let's not talk about the content of the plot. If the plot is still the same as the previous plot of the priest, it will indeed make the comic a bit boring. So, at this time, of course it is the turn of the legendary memory killer to appear. Makoto Takahashi did not continue to hide anything from his new wife Eiji. After all, compared to a certain good gay duo, with the blessing of genius talent skill attributes, Eiji Naizuma's understanding ability is much stronger. And this is not a normal level of memory killing. Is this the past of Emi Yakiritsugu? It sounds very interesting. Eiji, who squinted his eyes, thought for a moment, then a hint of excitement flashed in his eyes. But what I am more curious about is Mr. Kuma from the Phoenix Academy. What you mentioned is not an ordinary level of memory killing. Because the content of this memory killing is the key to obtaining pleasure, Makoto Takahashi licked his lips, squinted his eyes and said to his new wife Eiji, it's different from the confused Kairi Koto mine. Emi Yakiritsugu had extremely firm beliefs and extremely lofty ideals from the very beginning, or in other words, before he participated in the Holy Grail War. Faith and ideals. Although Takahashi Makoto did not finish what he said, but with just such a reminder, Naiizuma Eiji seemed to have noticed what the next plot will be like. His eyes flickered again, known as expectation in the light of the light. Naiizuma Eiji held the manga manuscript in his hands tightly with both hands, his breath becoming a little confused. Although I don't know what kind of content you will draw, Mr. Kuma of the Phoenix Academy, but in terms of the plot theme, it is still based on pleasure mainly. Of course. In the past, the reason why I chose to become a cartoonist was just because I wanted to use it to hide my identity as the last demon king of the human world. He looked up at the sky, but in fact, Makoto Takahashi, who was just staring at the ceiling, deliberately said in a melancholy tone, but later I discovered that the dramatic changes in human emotions when observing comics can not only bring me a pleasurable feeling, but also make me gradually the decaying soul is nourished. So you fell into overindulgence in pleasure. If it were Uncle Tintin on the assistant side, or Yoshida on the editor side, he would definitely complain about the bad taste of a middle-class cartoonist at this time. However, as an ally, Eiji Naiizuma showed understanding and recognition. I feel a little depressed. Putting the manga manuscript on the table, Naiizuma Eiji kept poking his fingers, and at the same time sighed in a tone full of envy, I also want to be like Mr. Kuma of the Phoenix Academy. You can find what you want on the road of pursuing pleasure. King of Black Flame, you don't have to be envious, because, this is Stein's Gate's choice. Makoto Takahashi showed a joyful smile on his face, not because he enjoyed the flattery of his new wife Eiji, it's because of the disappointed look on the new wife Eiji's face at this moment. For the sake of the pleasure you provide me, King of Black Flame, let me show you another way to obtain pleasure in advance. Drink ha 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 ha. Another way to obtain pleasure. Eiji Naiizuma repeated the words of a certain Chuyuni manga artist, and his eyes changed. I have some sad news for you readers. According to the regulations proposed by the boss, no holidays and weekends during construction. Starting from May, a certain cat will only have 2 days off per month in the future. Yes, that's right. There are only 2 days per month. Junhee Shuangziajiang has been killed. What's even more unfortunate is that irregular overtime work occurs quite frequently. Once you work overtime, you basically don't get off work until after 11 p.m. So in terms of updates, sorry. Please don't expect too much. All in all, a certain cat will work hard. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 675. Human beings are ugly creatures, cruel creatures that gain pleasure by bullying those they dislike. Therefore, although the extravagant idea of world peace is a common pursuit of all mankind, for human beings whose soul roots have always had the attribute of fighting /U0026 plundering, the so-called world peace is just a kind of longing, a dream that is elusive and out of reach. That's right. It's just because it's impossible to achieve, that's why it's called a dream. Unlike Kirei Kotomine, who was confused and overwhelmed, Emi Yakiritsugu had firm beliefs since he was a child, or in other words, he had such a lofty but unrealistic dream as hope for world peace. Only the party of justice can bring peace to the world, whether it is the historical records of various countries around the world or countless novels and comics. This view occupies the mainstream. Therefore, in order for Emi Yakiritsugu to realize his dream of world peace, the most effective and convenient way is to become a partner of justice. Judging from the previous plots of the manga, it is hard to believe that Emi Yakiritsugu, who has implemented the action pattern of the end justifies the means to the end, can actually be a man who fully hopes for world peace and treats it as an ideal and works tirelessly for it, boasting that partner of justice. Emi Yakiritsugu, who represented the Ainsburn family in the war, earned the title Magician Killer through killing in the world of mages before participating in the Holy Grail War, and after participating in the Holy Grail War, Emi Yakiritsugu was exposing his wife to the public as a cover. He was hiding in secret to collect intelligence and carry out assassinations, in order to deal with Director Ken, one of the masters. Emi Yakiritsugu could even completely ignore the other people. Staying in the hotel. Directly carried out the act of blasting the hotel. Later, through coercion and conspiracy, they even used coercion and conspiracy to kill Uncle Gun and killed the half-disabled Director Ken. Although I am a dreamer who longs for world peace at heart, I did not tell Eiji the new wife much information about Emi Yakiritsugu, but only reviewed the performance of this magician killer in the Holy Grail War. Takahashi Makoto couldn't help but sigh, but Emi Yakiritsugu is a completely ruthless realist when it comes to action. Regardless of his ability to understand the comic plot or the speed of completing the comic manuscript, as an ally of the crazy cartoonists, Eiji Naizuma's performance has always been very strong. However, sometimes it also bothers a middle-class cartoonist, because Eiji Naizuma's insight is too much. For example now. Generally speaking, it is remarkable for a manga artist to be able to accept a plot with a large amount of information in a short period of time, but Eiji Naizuma is not only able to understand the plot in a short period of time, he is also able to quickly analyze the plot and ask your questions. According to the content of what you said, Mr. Kuma of the Phoenix Academy, it seems to be somewhat contradictory. Eiji Naizuma frowned and thought for a moment. When Makoto Takahashi was about to continue, he suddenly asked, why would Emi Yakiritsugu, a ruthless realist, have such a strange idea of becoming a partner of justice? Weird idea. Makoto Takahashi looked at his new wife Eiji with some doubts, then waved his hand and retorted, King of Black Flame, everyone has wanted to be a savior or a partner of justice at one time or another. Is this the right idea? I had similar thoughts before. Eiji Naizuma revealed his dark history with a normal expression, without any embarrassment. This is probably the so-called innocent heart, right? But considering the age of Emi Yakiritsugu in the manga, there must have been some special event when he was young, right? Originally, Eiji Naizuma wanted to complain about Emi Yakiritsugu for having such a middle-class idea at this age. The reason why he suddenly changed the topic was because Eiji Naizuma suddenly realized that the super powerful manga in front of him he seems to be an older patient with advanced secondary disease. At least Naizuma Eiji feels that after starting a family, he will never have thoughts such as I am His Majesty the Demon King from another world or it is my long cherished wish to eradicate human beings and destroy the world. You really noticed it? It seems that choosing you, the King of Black Flame, as an ally is really Stein's Gate's choice. he didn't notice that Eiji Niizuma deliberately changed the topic, or maybe it was a certain middle-class manga artist. Don't care? When Emi Yakiritsugu was young, he was originally a cheerful young man. Although he lived a wandering life with his father, he still had a happy childhood when he lived in seclusion on a certain island. Then disaster struck. Speaking of Eiji Niizuma, when you mention someone else's misfortune, why do you immediately become energetic and your eyes light up? The person who is truly evil and happy should actually be you, the talented cartoonist, right? Then what happened to Master Cosima from the Phoenix Institute that caused Emi Yakiritsugu's character to be distorted? In terms of cause and effect, it should be the magician who is searching for the source, Makoto Takahashi said as he quickly drew the character of a certain character on the blank paper. Emi Yakiritsugu's father, Emiya, like other magicians, Miyazaki has been studying magic in order to reach the source, but the difference is that Miyazaki seems to have found a method, but it will take hundreds of years to complete this method. In order to solve the problem of lifespan, Emiya Norikan began to explore ways to become a death apostle as a last resort. But something went wrong in the experiment, and the young Emi Yakiritsugu had to do something. Eiji Niizuma squinted his eyes and quickly guessed the subsequent plot, an event that can distort a young man's will. Oh, now I'm super curious. Emi Yakiritsugu lives on a small island, and there is a girl who takes care of him like a younger brother, named Siale. After briefly telling his new wife Eiji about Siale's character, Takahashi Makoto said with a joyful smile on his face, he continued to talk about the sudden turning point in the plot, because Emi Yakiritsugu didn't stop it in time. Siale became a ghoul-like monster and turned her bloodthirsty demonic nature into her, infected the residents of the entire island, turning the originally peaceful island into a living hell in an instant. So, Emi Yakiritsugu, who realized that he had made a mistake, took it upon himself to kill Siale, who had been taking care of him. Eiji, the new wife, took advantage of Makoto Takahashi to drink water and immediately made up for his guess, and then sighed with some disappointment. If this is just a plot, then it is different from what I expected. Humph. Killing your childhood sweetheart, King of Black Flame, your idea is too conservative. Makoto Takahashi shook his head slightly and said something outrageous without changing his expression. If it's just to this extent, how can it cause a drastic change in Emi Yakiritsugu's character? Oh, is there really an unexpected surprise? Judging from Eiji Niizuma's current performance, it is obvious that this talented cartoonist has also embarked on the road of pleasure with no return. Hey, Master Cosima from the Phoenix Institute, could it be that the person Emi Yakiritsugu killed was? Well, as you expected, it's none other than Norikan Emiya. Makoto Takahashi's smile at this moment can only be described with the word pleasure. Recalling his previous behavior of not stopping Siale, combined with the tragic situation on the island, and the speculation of the bounty hunter Natalia who suddenly appeared on the island, at that moment, Emi Yakiritsugu finally realized that if I stop my father, Norikan Emiya, such a tragedy will not only become history, but it will definitely happen again in other places in the future. So, in order to stop Emiya Norikan, Emi Yakiritsugu killed his own father. Hey, Shinzuma Eiji, your expression now seems to be very wrong. Why, Eiji Niizuma, do you have eyes shining with wonder and a look of admiration on your face? Speaking of which, normal people should complain at this time that this plot design is too heartbreaking? That's not right. You, the King of Black Flame, are wrong about something. Makoto Takahashi took a deep breath and explained to Eiji, his new wife who was full of doubts, Emi Yakiritsugu did not kill anyone to stop him. For Emi Yakiritsugu, killing is just a way to save more people. Killing, to save more people, through the prompts of a certain middle-class cartoonist. Eiji Niizuma showed a look of surprise on his face. If Norikan Emiya is allowed to escape, the tragedy on the island will be if it happens again, more people will die. Therefore, in the view of Emi Yakiritsugu, by killing Norikan Emiya, he actually indirectly saved more people. Master Judge Hen from the Phoenix Academy, this kind of thinking seems to be very problematic. Oh, it seems that you, the King of Black Flame, have realized it too. Makoto Takahashi looked at the strange expression on his new wife Eiji's face at this moment, and finally couldn't help but laugh out loud. A man who has firm beliefs and implements his own will, when a person discovers one day that the ideas he has always adhered to are wrong, the devastated expression he shows at the moment when his faith collapses, for me, it is the supreme pleasure. Drink, ha 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 ha. I can probably guess the subsequent development of the entire manga. However, this strange way of conception. Hearing Takahashi Makoto's arrogance and thinking about opening the new world gate, Eiji Nyaizuma returned. When he came to his senses, his eyes were filled with burning fighting spirit, and he whispered, "Sure enough, Master Judge Hen of the Phoenix Academy is the opponent I want to defeat the most." The analysis of Kiritsugu Papa's first kill in this chapter is just the personal understanding of a certain cat. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 676. Partner Part 2, The Man Who Loves the Whole World. To become a partner of justice, you must first meet one requirement. Love this world more than anyone else. Be it a magician killer, or someone who does whatever it takes to achieve his goal, or even an idealism that is not understood by the world. On the surface, Emi Yakiritsugu can be called the world destroyer, like a god of death with a disaster aura, and wherever he goes, there is often killing and death. But in fact, the man named Emi Yakiritsugu deeply loves the whole world, and loves this cruel and realistic world full of magicians and aliens more than anyone else. Perhaps the love for the world, in this world dominated by abnormal people, perhaps no one can compare to Emi Yakiritsugu. When he was young, Emi Yakiritsugu loved this world passionately and sincerely. Kiritsugu Emiya knows what magic is, and he also knows that the goal of a magician is to reach the root. He also knows that his father is doing some secret research, but Kiritsugu Emiya always holds the idea that the progress of human research is for the sake of humanity. He does not know what terrible consequences his father's research will cause, nor does he know what kind of disaster the progress of magicians will bring to humanity, and he does not know that the development of magic will lead humanity into hell. Until that day, he witnessed his childhood sweetheart, who had always taken care of him, turn into a bloodthirsty monster and longed for him to end his life. The red lotus flames burned everything, and the cold iron cross brought the breath of death. The residents on the island were knocked down one after another, turned into dead disciples, and then bit and devoured each other, and finally turned into corpses. The tragedy on the island had a strong impact on the young Kiritsugu Emiya. It was because he did not kill Siale that the island became a purgatory on earth. At this time, Natalia, a magician hunter wearing a windbreaker, holding 2 guns, with silver hair and blue eyes, saved Emi Yakiritsugu, who was almost killed by the dead villagers. Natalia, who does not belong to the Magic Association, is an impeccable woman no matter where she is. Her style has always been to go alone, snatch the prey before the association's exclusive executor, and then resell it at a high price. Although Natalia has always maintained this evil style of behavior, it is precisely because of this way of survival that Natalia will not become the type of partner of justice that will be targeted by the villains first. Of course, this does not mean that Natalia has been blinded by money and has completely lost her humanity. First knock down others ruthlessly, and then help others with an indifferent attitude. It is this kind of decisive killing but with a hint of humanity that may make the rescued Emi Yakiritsugu trust her. If Siale had been killed at the beginning, then the following things would not have happened, and the originally peaceful island would not have turned into hell. After talking with Natalia, the boy named Emi Yakiritsugu's heart had already begun to twist. If it were an ordinary person, he would definitely stop Emi Yakiritsugu from thinking that killing one person can save more people at this moment, or try to correct it, but unfortunately, the person Emi Yakiritsugu met at this time was Natalia, who acted in a style that was both good and evil. So, after feeling Emi Yakiritsugu's awakening, Natalia did not stop Emi Yakiritsugu, but instead guided him to kill his biological father, Emiya Norikata, according to Emi Yakiritsugu's wishes. If you want world peace, you can only kill all possible sources of disasters and wars. If you want to be the terminator of all struggles in the world, then kill all existences that hinder the realization of justice. When Emi Yakiritsugu killed his father Emiya Norikata, he had such an idea. But despite this, Kiritsugu Emiya still loves this world full of malice towards him. If his father's death gave Kiritsugu Emiya the concept of partner of justice, then, in the following time with Natalia, it provided Kiritsugu Emiya with the fighting power and execution power to realize his own concept. Although Natalia took in Kiritsugu Emiya who had nowhere to go, it was not for the purpose of raising him, but to treat Kiritsugu Emiya as an assistant, taking Kiritsugu around the world with him, wiping out and slaughtering those magicians who deviated from the track. This not only made Kiritsugu Emiya firm in his own concept in his actions again and again, but also made Kiritsugu Emiya gradually master extraordinary combat ability. So, Mr. Hawinkuma, are you telling me all this to whitewash Kiritsugu Emiya? As Makoto Takahashi gradually added to Kiritsugu Emiya's past, Eiji Nazuma said calmly, but in my opinion, Kiritsugu-sama cannot be considered a villain. No, it's not whitewashing, King of Black Flame. Makoto Takahashi pushed the finished drawing of Kiritsugu Emiya carrying a bazooka and shooting down a plane in front of Eiji Nazuma while speaking, shook his aching arms, and said with a somewhat melancholy tone, I just think that for someone like Kiritsugu Emiya who has a firm belief and keeps moving forward, it would be too superficial to hastily judge his goodness or evil based on the setting in the comics. Yeah, that's true. Nyaizuma Eiji looked at the comic book on the table, Emiya Kiritsugu kneeling on the ground and crying loudly, and felt a little depressed inexplicably. After a long sigh, he immediately changed the subject. But Mr. Hawinkuma, the plot you added later. Should I say it was unexpected, or should I say, expected? When he was young, Emiya Kiritsugu did not kill Siale, which led to the destruction of the entire island, and when faced with a nearly identical situation again, Emiya Kiritsugu chose to kill Natalia. The future is indeed a repetition of history, but the human named Emiya Kiritsugu made two opposite choices. No, maybe it looks the same to others, but for Emiya Kiritsugu, the result is the same, right? Because he chose to give in and did not kill Siale, which brought disaster to the entire human race on the island, Kiritsugu Emiya eventually buried his father with his own hands in order to avoid the tragedy from happening again. In order to avoid more deaths, Kiritsugu Emiya resolutely chose to kill and personally killed his mentor Natalia, who was like his adoptive mother. I always feel that you, Mr. Hawinkuma, are too cruel to Mr. Kiritsugu. After Nazuma Eiji sorted out the comic manuscripts and piled them up, he sat cross-legged on the chair opposite Takahashi Makoto. Although the turning point of the plot setting is very interesting, but I feel a little distressed about what happened to Mr. Kiritsugu. Distressed? He, King of Black Flame, it seems that you still understand Kiritsugu Emiya's love for the world too superficially. It is a rare opportunity to give Eiji Nazuma spiritual counseling and get pleasure from him. Makoto Takahashi said that his current state is already superb. It is not wrong to want to end all the fights in the world, even though he has been betrayed time and time again by this world and tortured by fate with pain that ordinary people cannot bear. Emiya Kiritsugu still adheres to the concept of partner of justice and keeps moving forward with love for the world. Is this love? Nyaizuma Eiji expressed some incomprehension. Isn't this love? Takahashi Makoto was a little emotional at this moment, as if he was not talking about Emiya Kiritsugu but himself. If it's not because of the love for the world, then Black Flame King, tell me, what kind of existence can support Emiya Kiritsugu to keep moving forward despite everything? Is it the belief of wanting to become a partner of justice? Is it the ideal of hoping for world peace? No, none of them, but love. The aura exuded by Takahashi Makoto at this moment was like the arrival of the true body of the devil, causing Nyaizuma Eiji to stand up and step back involuntarily. Well, the actual situation is that Nyaizuma Eiji felt that the emotions of a certain Chuyuni cartoonist were too excited at the moment, and standing up and stepping back was just to ensure his own safety, that's all. Supporting Emi Yakiritsugu to move forward, or even supporting Emi Yakiritsugu's survival. It is the deep love in my heart for this world. It is precisely because of the deep love for this world that Emi Yakiritsugu will become a partner of justice. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sd Email. Chapter 677. Chang, you guy, what on earth are you thinking about? While roaring like a ghost, Yoshida slammed the manga manuscript he had just finished on the table. The scene of Yoshida-san's soul-vomiting roar. Uncle Tintin, who was frightened by Yoshida's sudden roar, trembled slightly in his hand holding the brush, looked up at the angry Yoshida, and then looked again Makoto Takahashi, who had a joyful smile on his face, twitched the corners of his mouth, silently swiped his brush again, and whispered, "For me, this kind of scene, it's been a long time coming." According to common sense, as the editor-in-chief of the weekly, now he should be regarded as the small and medium-sized boss on the editorial side of the weekly. Yoshida should not do this in front of the cartoonist throwing the completed cartoon manuscript on the table. That's rude behavior. However, what Yoshida is facing is not an ordinary existence, but a certain middle-class cartoonist who is full of madness and will do anything to seek pleasure. I clearly know that the other party definitely did it on purpose, and I know that the other party expects me to show that I am angry but helpless. Look. I also know that the angrier I am, the more pleasant the other party will be, but unfortunately, sometimes mere reason cannot prevent the sudden outburst of human emotions. In the end, Yoshida failed to control his emotions, and still embarked on the path that Takahashi Makoto had clearly planned to trap him. Oh, this is the expression I want to see. My beloved cat, your current expression, really makes me pleased. He glanced at Uncle Tintin who was pretending to be calm next to him. After conveying the hint of "I'll harvest pleasure from you later" with his eyes, Makoto Takahashi stared at Yoshida with a smile on his face. I wasn't able to collect enough pleasure from the King of Black Flame, but I still let him. I thought that the confusion technique implanted in the comic manuscript failed, but now after seeing your performance in My Belonging Cat, I understand that the reason for the failure should not be on my side, but on my side. Because the resistance of the Black Flame King is a bit high. I told you not to show the completed manga manuscript to other cartoonists before it is serialized. Yoshida slapped the table hard and continued to roar, Chang, you have never worried about others. Will I plagiarize your comics because I read them in advance? Plagiarism? I'm very worried. In order to get pleasure from his editor, a certain middle-level cartoonist deliberately followed Yoshida's words and patted his chest while showing a scared look. Yeah, I'm very worried. Damn. If I can't beat him. No matter from his tone or expression, Yoshida can feel the perfunctory attitude of a certain middle-class cartoonist, so Yoshida also knows very well that the only thing he can do now is, just draw a circle in your heart and curse a certain cartoonist who laughs so hard. To be honest, Makoto Takahashi is not worried about plagiarism from other cartoonists. Let's not talk about the character of other cartoonists who can be recognized by me. Which cartoonist who is truly capable of serialization is not a proud person who is absolutely confident in his own talent? And for things like plagiarizing other people's works, even if you can achieve certain results in a short period of time, if you don't have the strength, the consequence of long-term serialization will be that the comics will be sold out and cut in half. Besides, the comics created by a certain second-grade cartoonist are themselves plagiarism of other people's works. The world does not revolve around you, and the laws of physics do not exist because of you. Since you can copy others, why don't you allow others to copy you? Not to mention, A truly talented cartoonist may suddenly have a flash of inspiration after plagiarizing certain plot settings, and then his mind will be opened up, and he may be able to create even better cartoons. Therefore, rather than Yoshida worrying about the occurrence of plagiarism incident, it would be better to say that from a personal perspective, Makoto Takahashi is very much looking forward to the occurrence of plagiarism incident. Speaking of Chen, it turns out that Mr. Eiji Niizuma has been hiding with you these days. Seeing the expectant look on the face of a middle-level cartoonist, Yoshida, as an editor who has worked with him for many years, although Yoshida cannot master the mind-reading technique, this kind of ability to commit fouls, but he also roughly guessed the other party's thoughts, in order to avoid the occurrence of a certain second-year manga artist inciting others to plagiarize. Yoshida tried his best to calm down his anger and began to change the topic. But why did you say that? Teacher Eiji Niizuma was not here when I contacted you before. Because the King of Black Flame went out to buy juice at that time, and he was not in the barrier I arranged. Seeing the small veins on Yoshida's forehead jumping, a certain middle-class cartoonist seemed not to have enough, and continued to be angry. To add fuel to the fire, he added, "My beloved cat, you also know that I have always been honest, so since the person was not in my field of vision at the time, I naturally answered no." What you said makes sense. Yoshida's mouth twitched several times before he said this dryly in a bitter tone. Therefore, Teacher Eiji Niizuma cannot contact the outside world, and it is also with you, Chen. It's irrelevant, right? Of course. As for not contacting the outside world, it's because the Black Flame King thinks that what we are talking about needs to be kept confidential. Hey, my cat, don't look at me with your pet-like curiosity. Since it is a confidential matter, I will certainly not tell you. Takahashi Makoto, who suffers from the terminal disease, cannot feel happy without complaining about Yoshida, successfully complained about his own editor-in-chief, and continued the previous topic in a happy mood. So, the Black Flame King has turned off his mobile phone since the discussion began. Well, it has nothing to do with me. Really has nothing to do with you. I think it was actually you, Aiken, who instigated it. You know, because of the sudden mysterious disappearance of Niizuma Eiji, the editor-in-chief Yujiro on the editorial side was as anxious as an ant on a hot pot. When the location and phone calls could not be connected, Yujiro borrowed a motorcycle from Yoshida and ran through the streets and alleys of the city, looking for any place where Nizuma Eiji might appear. In other words, when Yujiro came to the door before, Nizuma Eiji also happened to be out, right? After watching Takahashi Makoto nod and put on an expression of "this kid is smart for once," Yoshida sighed silently and felt a little sympathetic to his colleague. It is said that after finally contacting Nizuma Eiji, Yujiro cried like a baby. Yujiro is such a tragedy. Oh, it's a pity that I couldn't participate in it. After listening to Yoshida's story about the event of searching for Eiji Shinzuma, Takahashi Makoto smacked his lips helplessly and waved impatiently at Yoshida. My beloved cat, since you provided me with information and pleased me today, I will be merciful once. Now pick up the comic manuscript and leave with peace of mind. I am really grateful. Wait. Ah-Chen, don't try to fool me. When mentioning the comic manuscript, Yoshida finally remembered that he had almost forgotten something because of gossiping about some gossip just now. About the comic manuscript, we haven't finished talking about it yet. Huh? My beloved cat, the comic manuscript has been handed over to you. After squinting his eyes and observing Yoshida for a while, Takahashi Makoto laughed sinisterly. Or do you, my beloved cat, want to have a real sword fight with me today? Don't change the subject, Chen. Yoshida spread the comic manuscript on the table and his face became serious. 2 consecutive chapters are depressing plots. Chen, aren't you worried that because of such a plot, the performance of the comic will decline, and then the whole comic will be cut off? Not worried at all. Facing Yoshida's doubts, Takahashi Makoto's tone was a little more serious, because this is a masterpiece. Yes, judging from the performance, This comic is indeed impeccable. Yoshida did not deny the performance of the comic, but changed the subject. But Chen, you should also consider it a little, the comic series environment. The weekly magazine that has always been serialized with the themes of passion, friendship, and victory suddenly serialized several depressing content in a row. My beloved cat, conservative will eventually be eliminated. Don't you think the environment of the weekly magazine is boring? That's right. The weekly magazine needs to change. The comics industry needs change. Takahashi Makoto stood up and pulled his white coat, with a firm look in his eyes. Since no one is going to do this, leave it all to me. No one needs to allow, no one needs to approve, and no one needs to admit. I will take up the banner of change and change this decadent era. In the end, I will stand on the top of the mountain that can look down on you ants because I have obtained enough pleasure, and be crowned as the god of the new world. Since I can't destroy the world as a demon king, then I will create a new world as a god. Ha 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 ha. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 678. You initiate the change and change the current weekly. Repeatedly muttering the wild ambitions of a certain middle school cartoonist, Yoshida, the editor-in-chief of a certain weekly, couldn't help but have a strange tone, as if he was being persuaded, and fell into deep thought. At a certain middle school, Yoshida, when the cartoonist was about to further describe his great ambition, Yoshida took a deep breath, and then let out a shocking roar. Chen, you guy, don't be too self-righteous. Oh, it's rare that you, my beloved cat, have the courage to resist me. Although his face was still full of a joyful smile, Takahashi Makoto's tone became unusually serious. For the sake of me, for the sake of your courage, familiar cat, I will make an exception this time and forgive your disrespect for me. Chen, are you serious? Ignoring Takahashi Makoto's teasing, Yoshida turned serious and confirmed to a secondary cartoonist again, the reason why you created and serialized Fate this comic, does it really have the attitude of wanting to change the current weekly magazine? No, the reason why this guy Chen is serializing comics is definitely to kill readers to gain pleasure. Uncle Tintin, who pretended to finish the comic manuscript carefully, couldn't control his body after hearing Yoshida's question. The ancient power of complaining, he couldn't help but muttered something in a low voice, and then, as soon as he finished speaking, Uncle Ding Ding saw a few inserted paintbrushes suddenly appeared on the table. He swallowed hard and immediately rushed to the table in a panic. A certain second-grade cartoonist over there squinted his eyes and admitted his mistake. Ah, I know. Chen, I'm very sorry. I was too complacent. Should I say that Chen, your ideals are great, or should I say that your ideas are too naive? Yoshida sensibly ignored the scene of cartoonist bullying his assistant and continued the topic naturally, trying to change the weekly format with just one popular comic. Unless a miracle occurs, this kind of thing can't be done. My beloved cat, what you want to say next is this, right? Makoto Takahashi punished Huan Chao using pseudo-unlimited sword system brush version. After Uncle Tintin intervened in the conversation, he once again turned his attention to the editor-in-chief Yoshida. My familiar cat, your idea is not wrong, but unfortunately, you have ignored a very important thing. Chen, are you talking about the influence of cartoonists? Yoshida held his chin and thought for a moment, then expressed his suspicion, but immediately denied it. Although this comic was written by you, Chen, and Mr. Eiji Niizuma, but with the influence you two have on the weekly, you won't be able to change the pattern of the weekly, right? Do you have influence as a cartoonist? Tisk 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 say. Makoto Takahashi crossed his hands on his chest and continued to tease Yoshida in a regretful tone, and the influence of cartoonists and so on. Ha 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 ha, my beloved cat, are you kidding me? How could the arrogant cartoonist Phoenix House be deceived by the arrogance unique to humans? I want to change the format of weekly magazines with a comic. After Yoshida sighed helplessly, he couldn't help but ask, isn't this arrogance? The manga Fate is a masterpiece. I remember I should have told all of you before, right? Makoto Takahashi stopped laughing and immediately put on a fanatical expression, because it is a masterpiece, so creating a miracle, isn't this a matter of course? Confidence is a good thing, but Chen Yoshida has completely given up on the logic of a middle-class cartoonist. It's not okay to be too confident. According to your usual statement, excessive confidence is also a kind of arrogance. My beloved cat, even though you have enough information until now, you still haven't been able to understand my thoughts. Makoto Takahashi put on an expression of I am as lonely as snow after being invincible in life, looked at Yoshida with sympathetic eyes, and slowly continued to explain, but I will forgive you. Because in this world, there are too many people like you, my cat, who are ignorant but don't know it. Only mortals, the world can become so pleasant and interesting. Yes, yes, Chen, whether you find it pleasant or interesting. Yoshida didn't want to understand Takahashi Makoto's thoughts. Not to mention that the thinking of a certain middle-class cartoonist is obviously different from ordinary people. Makoto Takahashi's outrageous bad taste is simply incomprehensible to Yoshida, who has a normal outlook on life. The only thing I want to know now is Cheng's reason for serializing this depressing plot. My beloved cat, in terms of your wisdom? Makoto Takahashi looked at Yoshida with some suspicion and hesitated for a moment before asking, are you sure you can hear my explanation? Yoshida kept warning himself not to be carried away by anger. After spending a lot of time, he suppressed the anger that was about to burst out and threatened angrily, if Chen, you can't convince me, I will submit these comic manuscripts to the editor-in-chief, who will decide whether they can be serialized. Tisk. In other words, do I have to go to the editorial headquarters again? Takahashi Makoto frowned slightly, looked at Yoshida who was serious, and couldn't help but sighed, tisk. If I don't explain it clearly, although the next thing will become very interesting, it will also become very troublesome. If I accidentally destroy the editorial side, it will affect the final plan. The mumbling of a certain middle school cartoonist made Yoshida's forehead vein jump. Then my beloved cat, before I analyze it, let me ask you a question first, okay? Makoto Takahashi thought for a moment, tapped the table with his fingers, and asked Yoshida, looking at the comics currently serialized in weekly magazines, most of them are praising passion, friendship, and victory, is that right? Well, most comics are basically like this. Yoshida nodded in agreement with Makoto Takahashi's point of view, stared at a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, and added meaningfully, of course, except for the works of some weird cartoonists. I'm not saying that this is bad. Ignoring Yoshida's targeted remarks, Makoto Takahashi thought for a while. After a moment, he said hesitantly, how should I put it, I just think that even if the setting is brilliant, if you read too many comics of the same type, you will feel bored. This. Yoshida pondered for a moment, and immediately slammed the table to refute, Aiken, you guy, this is sophistry. Sophistry? Takahashi Makoto was not frightened by Yoshida's momentum, but laughed very much. Then let me put it another way. My beloved cat, although I don't deny that the Royal Road in the weekly magazine is the mainstream, but don't you think in many mainstream comics, Plots such as justice will eventually triumph over evil and good people will eventually be rewarded, and bad people will eventually suffer the consequences appear too frequently. Isn't this a good thing about comics? Spreading positive energy and bringing hope to readers, there's nothing wrong with that. The joyful smile that Makoto Takahashi showed at this moment, in Yoshida's view, was like a poisonous snake showing its fangs, making people feel trembling and cold. Although he knew that he should stop Makoto Takahashi from continuing to speak, for some reason, Yoshida did not stop him. But such gentleness, such kindness, sometimes it is poison to humans. My beloved cat, have you forgotten the cruelty and reality of the world we live in? I wanted to ask this a long time ago. Why? Yoshida sighed silently, and looked at Takahashi Makoto helplessly, his tone filled with unspeakable emotions. Why do you always have such paranoid and dark thoughts, Chang? Because no matter how you live, no matter how many years you live, the world. Takahashi Makoto leaned back in his chair, his tone became a little low, it's still as filthy as ever. That. Yoshida suddenly realized at this moment, that he had actually made the unforgivable mistake of discussing life with Tsuyunobu. Let's continue discussing the plot of the comics. Since my cat is so pious, okay, Takahashi Makoto pouted unconsciously, picked up the comic manuscript on the table, and said while flipping through it, in many comics serialized in weekly magazines, many protagonists rely on firm beliefs to achieve success in the end. But in reality, it is just the opposite. Many people have or have had firm beliefs and have worked hard for them for a long time, but in the end, they did not achieve anything, and even paid and lost a lot. Is it because of something as ethereal as the protagonist halo? Because you are not the protagonist, because you don't have the protagonist halo, so you should accept failure. That's not right. If that's the case, then for the already determined ending, what are the efforts that humans have made, what is it? So, Aiken, you want to serialize this depressing plot. Yoshida's face suddenly became a little weird, because at this moment, a certain editor-in-chief really couldn't say what he wanted to say. Yeah, because I want to let readers know through such a plot that even if you are the protagonist of a comic, even if you have a firm belief and work hard for it, you may not necessarily succeed, and you may even lose a lot. It was clearly a statement of a middle school manga artist, but in Yoshida's opinion, a middle school manga artist was emitting a dazzling light at this moment. In short, what I call change is through depressing plots. To heal readers who are played by fate or cruel reality. Is this, still the Takahashi Makoto I know? Hearing Takahashi Makoto say this, Yoshida's eyes were full of shock and doubt. Hey, my beloved cat, don't look at me with that look. Takahashi Makoto seemed to feel the malice in Yoshida's eyes, shook his head helplessly, and sighed with some melancholy. Even if this world is so cruel, in some ways, I am also like Emi Yakiritsugu, I love the whole world from the bottom of my heart. Yeah, like Takahashi Makoto, a certain cat also deeply loves the whole world. Oh. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 679. Debating whether a certain choice is right or not, this kind of thing is something that Yoshida has never thought about before. But now. Headache. Yoshida's brows almost knitted into a straight line as he held tightly to the document bag used to hold the comic manuscripts in his hand. Should I say now, I am simply bringing this upon myself. Originally, when he first went to Takahashi Makoto to collect manga manuscripts, Yoshida didn't think it was a difficult job. After all, even though a middle-class cartoonist had a bad personality, most of the time his ideas were of the normal kind. It is in a state that people cannot understand, but the only thing that is certain is that a certain second-grade cartoonist adheres to the professional ethics of providing cartoon manuscripts on time very strictly. But after reviewing the manga manuscript as the editor-in-chief, Yoshida came up with the idea of asking a certain middle-class cartoonist to revise the plot of the comic. The reason was naturally because the cartoon manuscript provided by a certain middle-class cartoonist was enough to be serialized for a month. The plot contents are all belonging to the depressive series, which is contrary to the mainstream of weekly magazines. But it's a pity. Yoshida not only failed to persuade a certain middle-class cartoonist to modify the plot, but was borrowed by a certain middle-class cartoonist to use the purpose of depression is to heal and I love this world from the bottom of my heart as the main theme, completely convinced. Of course, according to Yoshida's character, although he would not leave such villain-specific declarations such as I won't let you go so easily next time we meet or I will definitely come back, a certain editor-in-chief said when he left the show. It's such a weak statement to stay for things that I can't decide, I'll leave it to the editor-in-chief to decide. Obviously, editor-in-chief Yoshida is a pure tsundere, for sure. If it were normal times, Yoshida might reflect on the arrogant remarks he made when he left Makoto Takahashi's side, but now Yoshida has no time to think about this. As the editor-in-chief, Yoshida was persuaded by the cartoonist, no matter how reluctant he would still follow the idea of a middle-class cartoonist and submit the cartoon manuscript to the serialization meeting. At least Yoshida still has the most basic professional qualities. When dealing with cartoonists, the editor-in-chief belongs to the editorial camp, so whether it is reviewing the cartoon manuscript or considering the angle of the problem, the weekly magazine is the first priority. However, when the cartoon manuscript provided by the cartoonist is approved, after that, the editor-in-chief will immediately switch to the cartoonist camp and try his best to win over the cartoonist to the weekly editor's side, although this kind of wallpaper style sounds very unscrupulous, it cannot be denied. This is the professional quality that a qualified editor should really possess. But how to convince the editor-in-chief of the bottle, the editor-in-chief who always maintains a serious face, to agree to serialize the comic manuscript in his hand that exudes a strong depressive atmosphere in the weekly? So, the real headache for Yoshida now, is this. When he knocked on the door of the editor-in-chief's office, Yoshida maintained a calm expression on the surface, but his brain was running crazily, thinking about how to convince the editor-in-chief. Should I use serious nonsense to change the editor-in-chief's mind, as a middle-grade cartoonist convinced himself before? Or should he follow his usual behavior pattern and try his best to fulfill his responsibilities as an editor, or just like a certain unscrupulous cartoonist, he used all kinds of righteousness to crazily coerce the editor-in-chief of Bottle into agreeing? Come in. When the voice of the editor-in-chief of Bottle sounded, Yoshida immediately restrained his wild imagination, took a deep breath, and then pushed open the office door. Yoshida-kun, what's the problem? The editor-in-chief of Bottle, who was reviewing the documents, looked up at Yoshida, stopped what he was doing, then crossed his hands and clasped his chin, perfectly restoring the Commander Akari's exclusive majesty posture, and slowly asked, well, it seems, it should be about the comic fate, right? Yes, editor. I'm very sorry. Yoshida, who was directly guessed by the editor of Bottle, was not too surprised. Instead, he breathed a long sigh of relief. While apologizing, he sent the comic manuscript to the editor of Bottle with both hands. Editor-in-chief, please take a look at the manga manuscript of Fate that will be serialized recently. At the same time, Uncle Tintin, who was working hard to finish the work at hand, suddenly stopped the brush in his hand and stared at Makoto Takahashi with doubtful eyes. Tintin-ji-san, if you want to ask a question, please just ask. But if you stare at me again with that kind of curiosity and inquiry effect. Makoto Takahashi, who was busy completing the manga manuscript, suddenly turned to the pen. His right hand waved rapidly in the void a few times, and then he said a murderous threat in a joyful tone, I will mistakenly think that you, Ding-Ding-ji-san, have successfully cultivated the inherent skill of assistant will not die with bare hands, and then launching a fatal attack. As for the method of attack, Ding-Ding-ji-san, you know. Hey, I know, Uncle Ding-Ding, whose mouth kept twitching, wiped the non-existent cold sweat on his forehead for no reason, and then asked with some restraint, "Hey, Cheng, are you sure you want to give it to me? Can Yoshida-san's manga manuscripts pass the serialization meeting?" Of course. If that editor-in-chief doesn't want to provoke an all-out war between the cartoonist side and the editor side. Hey, Takahashi Makoto, are you trying to explain your reasons? It's just another threat. Well, you are really confident. Uncle Ding Ding smiled a little reluctantly at this moment, but maybe I can understand what you said before, Cheng. It seems that Tintin Ji-san, you are also a person with stories. Do you think I would say that today's Makoto Takahashi seems to be the same as usual? Well, he is still as bad as ever. My companion cat won't believe that kind of statement to deceive children, right? Eh? Then Yoshida-san. It is obvious that Uncle Tintin, who is the assistant, actually believes this kind of statement to deceive children. Because that guy from my familiar cat has visually noticed my hidden purpose in it, Makoto Takahashi put down his brush and continued to explain to the somewhat dull Uncle Tintin, use depression to heal, this statement is not wrong, and I have taken action for this. But Ding Ding Jisang, don't forget, I told my family about my purpose at the beginning. At the very beginning, Uncle Ding Ding's expression changed, and his breathing became a little faster. Cheng, do you really want to initiate reform and change the current structure of the weekly? Oh, Tintin Ji-san, you are also not very honest. Makoto Takahashi did not deny Uncle Tintin's speculation, but instead joked with a joyful face, it seems that you were pretending to be I look like I am completing my work seriously, but in fact I am listening carefully to the conversation between me and my beloved cat. Tisk, tisk, tisk. I didn't expect Tintin Ji-san, who seems to be a straightforward person, to be such a scheming person. But with just one comic, no, I should say just with a few chapters of serialization, how can we initiate reform? Uncle Tintin did not care about the ridicule of a middle-class cartoonist, but was more concerned about how Takahashi Makoto sounded. An extremely arrogant idea. A single spark can start a prairie fire. To put it simply, it should be like this. Seeing Uncle Tintin still confused, Takahashi Makoto sighed helplessly and continued to explain, in the mainstream kingdom serialization in comics, if such a plot suddenly appears, it must be very interesting and pleasant for readers, right? No, you should really feel Cheng's madness. Without thinking about it, you can know the expression on the reader's side after seeing the depressing plot. Uncle Tintin is full of aversion to cold. Complain. How could it be? I just showed another possibility to the readers. Makoto Takahashi seemed a little dissatisfied with the description of Uncle Tintin and shook his head slightly. Like the protagonist of the mainstream kingdom comics, he has lofty ideals, have firm beliefs, and work hard for them, but in the end, the ending is completely opposite to happy reunion. This is simply an evil comic. Ding Ding Ji-san, you are so rude. How could it be evil way? Makoto Takahashi lightly knocked on the table. I only reveal the reality and cruelty of the world to readers, nothing more. Cheng, you are destroying readers' longing and yearning for the two-dimensional world. At this moment, Uncle Tintin deeply felt what pure evil is. This is destruction. This is blasphemy. No, I just want to make readers doubt. A certain cartoonist, who knew nothing about it, said calmly, but once the seeds of doubt are planted, they can no longer be removed. Is Cheng doing this kind of thing just to satisfy your own pleasure? Although I don't deny that there are reasons for this, but more importantly, in order to prevent readers from yearning for the two-dimensional world while losing the fear and despair they should have for the two-dimensional world. Makoto Takahashi said with a righteous face, I just want to convey this truth. Believe me, regarding the understanding of this truth, no one in this world has more say than me. Looking at Uncle Ding Ding's almost spoiled expression, Takahashi Makoto thought of himself. What happened to him suddenly made him lose interest, and his tone became a little melancholy, because my coming to this world, is actually the choice of Steins Gate. Thank you to the readers who have always supported a certain cat. Of course, this is not the rhythm of entering the palace. I just feel that a certain cat has always just coded words and did not formally thank readers for their support like other authors. If it makes you readers feel uncomfortable, a certain cat apologizes. But the support of readers has always been in my heart, so the only thing I can do is to do my best to code, that's all. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 680. I don't know what kind of dirty pie deal Yoshida had with the editor-in-chief of Bottle. Ahem, no, I probably don't know if Yoshida has greatly improved the combat effectiveness of Speed Cannon because he turned on Gene Lock. In short, when Yoshida came to Takahashi Makoto again, he also brought a certain secondary cartoonist expected unexpected news from an assistant uncle. The editor-in-chief of Bottle actually agreed to serialize that wave of depressing and brutal comics. Oh, my beloved cat, I thought it would take you a while, or even ask me to appear in person to say it. I didn't expect that you actually succeeded in persuading that adult. It's amazing. I'm impressed by you. After listening to Yoshida's feedback that the comics can be serialized, a certain middle-level cartoonist deliberately showed a look of surprise for a moment, and then walked quickly to Yoshida's side, patting the other person's shoulder hard while he said in a cheerful tone, "If you, my beloved cat, always maintain such awesome fighting power, then, we will no longer have an opponent in front of us. Drink ha 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 ha. Hey, please spare me." Yoshida quickly distanced himself from Takahashi Makoto and complained while rubbing his shoulders, "The editor-in-chief allows you to be willful, Chen. You understand the reason without me having to explain. But before I come here, the editor-in-chief asked me to tell you something. It won't be an example next time, right?" Hey, I got it. What makes Yoshida unhappy is not the self-knowledge of a middle-class cartoonist, but the indifferent attitude. Obviously, the so-called "it won't be an example next time" has nothing to do with for a middle-grade cartoonist. He is completely useless. Tisk. Chen, you are still as perfunctory as ever. After Yoshida curled his lips in displeasure, he did not continue to argue with Takahashi Makoto about can he draw depressive comics. After all, for as certain as the editor-in-chief, Yoshida knows the extremely bad taste of the second-year cartoonist. As for trying to get a certain middle-class cartoonist to quit his bad taste, Yoshida thinks that is a task that no, even a human being cannot accomplish. By the way, my beloved cat, I have something to tell you. Makoto Takahashi pulled the white coat on his body and opened his mouth to whet Yoshida's appetite, but his expression became a little tangled and he hesitated for a moment. Then he spoke again, "Well, let's forget it. I feel like it's not time to say that now, but it's not time to do it visually." An ominous premonition, although a certain middle-class cartoonist only whetted his appetite, Yoshida instantly sensed the full malice of the other person's bad character who was unpleasant if he didn't cause trouble. "Since you think it's not the right time, Chen, then just concentrate on completing the comic manuscript. At this time, it is more important to divert the attention of a middle-class cartoonist than to dissuade him. But I really want to know what kind of expression you, my beloved cat, will show after I tell you that." Makoto Takahashi said in a tone full of expectation. "You must know that the black flame after Wang heard the news, he showed a very pleasant expression on my face. What on earth is going on, Chen? Do you think I would ask this?" Although he was a little concerned about the news that would amaze his new wife, Eiji, Yoshida was no longer the young and ignorant editor in charge. "Humph. If you don't want to say it, Chen, just pretend I didn't hear it." This is not Yoshida being arrogant, nor is it a clumsy use of provocation. Yoshida can naturally feel that Takahashi Makoto is setting a trap for him. However, Yoshida, who knows the truth of if you don't seek death, you won't die, naturally he will not take up the topic of Takahashi Makoto. Oh, really? My beloved cat, are you sure you really don't want to know? Ignoring Yoshida's cold attitude, a middle-class cartoonist just looked at his editor-in-chief seriously and confirmed again and again. I say Chen, please restrain yourself a little bit. This kind of low-level provocation, Takahashi Makoto's three-part questioning made Yoshida's curiosity rise, and at the same time, his vigilance also reached the highest level. If you want to say it, I won't stop you. Of course, if you don't want to say it, forget it, I don't really want to know. Although the tone of his words was somewhat similar, Yoshida was really not considered tsundere. Yoshida just sensed the aura of trouble from the questioning style and tone of a certain middle-class cartoonist. Oh, 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 my beloved cat, you are really dishonest. Although Takahashi Makoto's tone was full of ridicule, there was a look of disgust on his face. Men's arrogance is really disgusting, but is this really okay? If you miss this news, and you are taken out to have a heart-to-heart talk by that adult in the future, please don't blame me. Wait. Chen, you guy. The adult Takahashi Makoto was talking about, Yoshida naturally knew that he was referring to the current bottle editor of the weekly magazine. And can it be considered a trivial matter for the editor-in-chief of Bottle to talk to him alone? In particular, a certain middle-level cartoonist vowed to make a declaration like "the blame lies with you, not me." A certain editor-in-chief was extremely frightened when he thought about it, and his expression became unnatural. He looked at the twitching look on the face of a certain middle-level cartoonist. With a joyful smile, after taking a deep breath, he gritted his teeth and asked, "What exactly do you want to say?" "But I don't want to talk about it now." Takahashi Makoto imitated the sitting posture of Nazuma Eiji, squatted on the chair, and kept poking his fingers. "Just now I suddenly realized that accidents are always accompanied by surprises, and spoilers in advance will kill you. What kind of mood would you feel when facing an enemy that you can't beat or escape from?" At this moment, Yoshida finally understood the true meaning of frustration. Perhaps the only thing you can do at this time is to abandon your dignity and integrity and let the enemy torture and ravage you, right? But if you think about it carefully, it seems that death is not a big deal. From the order of events, the result is estimated to be the same. Seeing Yoshida's expression of Takahashi Makoto, "You are happy," a certain Chuyunabaku manga artist pinched his chin and muttered to himself for a while, then stared at Yoshida with joy and said, "In this case, I will be merciful and tell you in advance. Hey, my beloved cat, I actually want a vacation." Huh? Vacation? Yoshida's mouth twitched, and he looked at a certain Chuyunabaku manga artist with some doubts. The reason why he went to such great lengths to deceive himself again and again was just for this. "Since my debut, I haven't had a break, you know. The reason I chose to become a cartoonist was just to skip school." Uncle Tintin and Yoshida were stunned when they heard a middle school cartoonist talk about the reason for becoming a cartoonist, but Takahashi Makoto ignored Uncle Tintin and Yoshida in a daze, and said with some resentment, "But since I became a cartoonist, I basically haven't had a good break, so my beloved cat, it's natural for me to want a vacation, right?" Vacation? Recalling a cartoonist who has recently started to take a break for various reasons, Yoshida suddenly felt that it was not too much for the cartoonist Hao Winkuma, who is considered a hard-working cartoonist in the cartoonist world, to want a vacation. "Aiken, you have such a pleasant life every day, do you still need to rest?" "I wanted to say this," Yoshida said casually, and then his tone suddenly became unusually serious, "but Chen, you have been working hard all the time. You deserve to take a good rest for a while." "Oh, my cat, it's great that you can understand." Takahashi Makoto suddenly grabbed Yoshida's hands and shook them hard at a speed that Yoshida couldn't react to. "Then I'll leave that adult side to you." "Yeah, no problem. Leave the editor-in-chief to me." Yoshida suddenly fell into a state of mysterious emotion for being able to have such a normal conversation with a certain Chuyunabaku mangaka, especially being thanked so sincerely by the other party. So as the editor-in-chief, Yoshida felt that he should do something for the mangaka under his command. By the way, Chen, how long do you want to rest? Is 2 weeks enough? Or a month? Of course, the more vacations the better. Takahashi Chen winked at Yoshida, then said calmly, the vacation I want, is of course permanent. No problem, permanent, er. The smile on Yoshida's face froze. Speaking of writing 20 documents in 5 days, a certain cat feels that he has been drained. Burned out? Aren't you a novelist? It should be easy to write this. Writing a novel is the same as writing meeting minutes, requests for instructions, and reports. Goddamn logic. Sorry, dear readers, I spent last week in various busyness. Now a certain cat feels that I am still alive. In a sense, it is really a miracle. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Email. Chapter 681. According to a certain middle-level cartoonist, the real meaning of a permanent vacation is to quit the cartoon world and stop drawing comics. If it had been in the past, Yoshida might have thought that this was just a joke by a middle-class manga artist, but now, although Takahashi Makoto still had the same smile on his face as usual, Yoshida knew that Takahashi Makoto was serious this time. Because of that kind of look, Yoshida had seen it before, he had seen it in those cartoonists who gave up cartooning. So, Yoshida did not ask Makoto Takahashi why he wanted to give up his career as a cartoonist, nor did he repeatedly confirm the authenticity of the news with Makoto Takahashi. Instead, he took the completed manga manuscript and left with a tangled expression. It's not that he doesn't want to ask, but Yoshida's heart is already messy at this moment. Of course, it's not that he doesn't want to persuade Takahashi Makoto, it's just that as the editor-in-chief of the weekly magazine, Yoshida also knows that in this state, there is no guarantee that he can successfully persuade a middle-level cartoonist to give up that seemingly joking decision. Chen, you. After Yoshida left, Uncle Tintin couldn't help but ask after hesitating for a moment, have you really decided not to draw comics anymore, and, have you decided to give up the career of a cartoonist? Tintin-ji-san, why do you ask questions knowingly? Makoto Takahashi did not finish the manga while talking to Uncle Tintin. Instead, he stood up, walked to sit in front of Uncle Tintin, and said in a serious tone, but what's slightly wrong is that I don't stop drawing comics, nor do I plan to end my career immediately, well, at least until I finish that comic. That comic, at this time, Uncle Tintin, who should be struggling with his future after a middle school cartoonist gave up his career, was keenly aware of the key words revealed in Takahashi Makoto's words, it's from the comic Fate Follow-Up. Follow-Up, Makoto Takahashi repeated the key words in Uncle Tintin's words. After staring at him with strange eyes for a moment, he slowly said, of course not, by the way, Tintin-ji-san, what do you think? It's really superficial. But according to the current plot rhythm of the comics, there are still many places in the comic Fate that have not been explained clearly. Uncle Tintin stopped the analysis abruptly, and then stared at Makoto Takahashi with complicated eyes for a long time. Then he sighed in a rather helpless tone, speaking of Chen, are you planning to dig holes and kill readers again like you did when you serialized the Eastern series? I see, in your mind, Tintin-ji-san, I am actually that kind of person. Uncle Tintin didn't even need to look at the expression of a middle-class cartoonist to feel the resentment emanating from him. But Tintin-ji-san, don't worry. As a professional cartoonist with extremely high professionalism, how could I do such a crazy thing? I have already arranged the follow-up plot of the comic Fate. There you have it, the heir with the crown level. Chen, the successor you are talking about, is indeed Mr. Eiji Shinzuma, right? Although he used a questioning tone, Uncle Ding Ding was very sure. After all, According to Uncle Ding Ding's knowledge, he can be compared with the person in front of him. The only manga artist who is very relatable in a white coat is Eiji Niizuma. But Aiken. Uncle Tintin, do you want to ask me why you didn't tell my companion cat about this matter? Makoto Takahashi, who had been talking seriously just now, immediately changed into a look of contempt for mortal wisdom. The reason, of course, it's for pleasure. Are you trying to get what you call pleasure by observing Yoshida-kun's anxious look? Uncle Tintin's mouth twitched, and he expressed sympathy for a certain hard-working editor. Tisk, this extremely twisted style, should I say it's what you did, Cheng? It's not like that, Tintin Gi-san. After hearing Uncle Tintin say it so simply, a middle school cartoonist said that he was not that superficial. Although it is indeed interesting to see my beloved cats in a state of deep entanglement, and then running around with various toils in a depressed mood, but this low-level way of obtaining pleasure, humph. Tintin Sanyo, it seems you don't know anything about how to obtain pleasure. That kind of extremely twisted thing, who the hell wants to know? Uncle Tintin roared angrily, proving that he did not want to become a similar being with the same hobby as a middle-class cartoonist. The news that the follow-up plot of the manga Fate will be in charge of Mr. Eiji Niizuma, if you don't tell Yoshida-kun, and Cheng, you just revealed your intention to retire, in the next period of time, that conscientious editor-in-chief will definitely come to my door frequently. So that's it? It turns out that this is the trap set by you, Cheng. S.A., who knows? Faced with Uncle Tintin's question, Makoto Takahashi spread his hands pretending to be innocent. Although I find this unfolding of human beings working hard without knowing their destiny very touching, but faced with the twists and turns of cruel fate in reality, whether humans choose to move forward firmly or choose to give up their obsessions, it is a very pleasant performance for me. You get so-called pleasure by spying on the inner transformation of human beings, you, Cheng. Should I be angry at this time? Uncle Ding Ding felt that he should be angry, but for the serious and heretical words and deeds of a certain Chuyunabaku cartoonist, Uncle Ding Ding did not know how to vent his anger and indignation through rebuttal. It's really bad enough. Perhaps the only thing Uncle Ding Ding can say at this moment, is this. Not good, the situation is quite bad. A certain editor in charge, who did not know that he had been calculated, kept repeating such words on the way back to the editorial headquarters, and completely ignored the eyes of the pedestrians around him who said this guy is sick in the brain. No, it should be said that he did not realize it at all. The news that a certain Chuyunabaku cartoonist planned to retire, Yoshida felt that he should report this matter to the editor-in-chief Ping. Originally, Yoshida didn't intend to do this, and wanted to do his best to persuade that weird-minded middle school manga artist. However, recalling the eye contact with a middle school manga artist just now, Yoshida knew at that moment that this was no longer something he could handle. But if it was editor-in-chief Pingzi who persuaded, Yoshida, who didn't know what kind of brutal scene he imagined, suddenly changed his face and shuddered unconsciously. But now the comic Fate co-produced by Cheng and Eiji Nizuma has not been completed yet, there should still be a chance. Yoshida saw the comic manuscript in his hand, his eyes lit up, and the fighting spirit in his heart suddenly burned. That's right, I will try my best to persuade Cheng. Well, I can definitely do it. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 682. Wanting to persuade Makoto Takahashi to change his mind, Yoshida felt that this was a task that he could not accomplish independently at this stage. So, finding a powerful reinforcement to help persuade Makoto Takahashi is an urgent matter. Originally, in Yoshida's cognition, Rina Ogata was the best candidate, no one else. Let alone the relationship between a certain middle school devil and a certain witch disguised as a voice actor, Yoshida knew that once Rina was recruited into his camp, it meant that he would definitely be invincible when facing Makoto Takahashi. But unfortunately, Yoshida's plan to recruit only lasted about 5 minutes, no, it should have ended before it even started. This abnormal phenomenon. After walking for 5 minutes towards the voice actor agency where Rina worked, Yoshida saw the stray cats and dogs gathered around him unconsciously. The corners of his mouth kept twitching. Ignoring the strange gazes of the pedestrians around him, he muttered to himself, if it weren't for that guy Chen behind the scenes, this phenomenon that can be called a spectacle or even a miracle would never happen. Meow, it's true. Just as Yoshida finished speaking, the leading gray cat suddenly called out, and then the army of cats and dogs that had been surrounding Yoshida stopped their movements instantly and stood still. It seems. Yoshida noticed that the gray cat was staring at him blankly, and swallowed his saliva with some palpitations. Chen must have guessed that I would go to find Rina, so this uncle was surrounded by a group of cats and dogs and blocked here. Yoshida, who didn't know cat language daily conversation, took a tentative step forward and immediately noticed that the eyes of the cats and dogs that had surrounded him before were all focused on him. This scene was quite terrifying. The footsteps raised in the air did not fall. Yoshida, who noticed that the situation was getting more and more weird, finally retracted his footsteps, frowned and thought for a moment, then turned around and started to move in the opposite direction. As Yoshida kept returning along the original path, the cats and dogs that were originally surrounding him gradually dispersed, but Yoshida did not stop, because through the glass of the surrounding shops, Yoshida could see that the gray cat that was estimated to be the leader was still following him closely. Tusk, it was not until he turned the corner that the feeling of being watched finally dissipated. Looking back, the gray cat that had just followed him across 3 streets was gone. Speaking of which, judging from what just happened, those cats and dogs that came into contact with Aiken are more like monsters than normal cats and dogs, right? Hey, Aiken doesn't plan to be a cartoonist. Could it be that he wants to lead these cats, dogs, and monsters that have already cultivated into spirits to conquer humans and rule the world? It has to be said that as the editor-in-chief with the deepest bond with a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, Yoshida has also been influenced by Takahashi Makoto to some extent, at least when encountering the weird situation just now. Other editors-in-chief on the editorial side will never have the same brain hole as Yoshida. If it doesn't work with Rina. Yoshida looked up at the tall building not far away and took a deep breath, then let's go find teacher Eiji Niizuma. Although he didn't have much contact with Eiji Niizuma, Yoshida knew, although Eiji Niizuma was an ally of a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, and now the two are serializing the comic fate together, Eiji Niizuma has always held an obsession with Makoto Takahashi called victory. Want to defeat Makoto Takahashi? It's not the kind of victory that comes from a certain manga is extremely popular or a certain inspiration is amazing. What Eiji Niizuma is pursuing now is to create a manga that can make a certain Chuyuni manga artist admit defeat in both plot and character design. If at this time, Eiji Niizuma heard the news that a certain Chuyuni manga artist was going to retire, before he gave up his obsession with victory, would Eiji Niizuma be willing to accept it? The more he thought about it, the more he felt that the plan was feasible. The melancholy and tangled look on his face relaxed a little, and the fatigue on his body seemed to be relieved a lot. Looking at the watch, Yoshida confirmed that Eiji Niizuma should stay at home to draw manga at this time, so he ran towards Eiji Niizuma's house with full energy. Speaking of Yoshida, have you forgotten that Makoto Takahashi said in person that Eiji Niizuma was the first person to know about his retirement? Oh, this development. Sitting on a chair, Eiji Niizuma quickly flipped through the comic manuscript, with the same expression as when the child discovered the treasure on his face. I thought the plot was already very interesting. I didn't expect that Mr. Hao Winkuma could go one step further on this basis. It's really amazing. Yes, I admit that Ah Cheng is very, very good, but Uncle Ding Ding, who had said the same thing for the 3rd time, found that Niizuma Eiji still ignored him like the previous 2 times. The corners of his mouth twitched involuntarily, and he turned his head to look at Takahashi Makoto, who was immersed in the true crazy cartoonist mode. He sighed silently and persuaded Nazuma Eiji, who was obsessed with the comics. Well, Nazuma Eiji, if you want to study, please finish the work you are responsible for before you proceed. You are so obsessed with the plot of the comics. No way. Eh? But the comics by Mr. Howin Kuma are very interesting. Nazuma Eiji finally put down the comics in his hand, with admiration in his eyes, and in order to defeat Mr. Howin Kuma, I am studying hard. Once I can master this perfect switching method between depression and healing, maybe. So, whether you want to learn or research. Although it seems quite rude to interrupt Nazuma Eiji's words, Uncle Ding Ding's tone is quite helpless. Before that, please finish your part of the work first, Mr. Nazuma Eiji. Tisk. Stingy. After Nazuma Eiji pouted unhappily, he instantly entered the true hot-blooded cartoonist mode like a certain second-year cartoonist. Under the astonished gaze of Uncle Ding Ding, he began to draw the comics at a very fast speed. Oh la 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 la. Of course, it would be better if Eiji Nazuma stopped making such passionate noises when he finished the comics. It's your decision. Go ahead. Curry sticks. By the way, compared to Eiji Nazuma's meaningless onomatopoeia, the speech of a certain Shuyonibu manga artist is much more recognizable, but when hope turns into despair, what kind of joy is this? All of this is the choice of Steins Gate. This twisted bad taste really makes Uncle Tintin feel very puzzled. Ha 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 ha. A certain Chuyuni cartoonist was laughing wildly and wantonly. Ola 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 Nazuma Eiji was shouting with passion. This is the first time I have such a feeling. Uncle Ding Ding, the assistant who was caught between the passionate Nazuma Eiji and the wild Takahashi Makoto, was completely overwhelmed by the two cartoonists and could only hide in the corner and tremble. The job of a cartoonist's assistant is really tiring. On this day, in Uncle Ding Ding's memory, there was a shadow of being ravaged by the two cartoonists in all directions. Ahem, you can ask Beidou about the question of cat language, and a certain cat will not cheat on the number of words to explain it in detail. Also, all readers, Happy Children's Day, have fun. The above.